This video is sponsored by Squarespace.
This is the first time I've seen all of this completely frozen over. Like the whole marina at the moment is frozen. There's a couple of little bits where it's started to thaw and you can see the water again. But it looks pretty awesome. And the low winter lights breaking through the trees. We're getting all these shadows and there are many dogs over in this direction.
Hang on, are these images of these two dogs actually sharp? Let's take a closer look. Of course the backgrounds are out of focus because I was shooting them at 2.8 on a 35mm lens, but when we look much more closely at the focus point on the dog's eyes, we can see these images are sharp enough. Let's take a look at a different photo. This shot from Milan, which I photographed on the stairs in Blurry. If you look really closely, you'll notice that this image is not sharp at all. But does it even matter? This Milan shot in particular I showed in a video last week and it received a few different timestamp comments praising the image. I mean, I like it, stylish outfit, nice side backlight, but I see all of the technical problems too. You can also see the problems with this image, the settings and how I edited it at the end of this video, and you might understand what I mean. Does this image look normal to you? You might notice that this image does not look sharp whatsoever. That is down to bad lighting in this particular scenario. The reason that bad lighting conditions result in unsharp images is because to expose for bad lighting conditions, we have to compromise most of our exposure controls. When we lower our shutter speed to increase our exposure, we also introduce motion blur. But the more motion blur we introduce, the less sharp our images are going to appear. And the same thing happens when we lower our aperture value. The lower we bring down our aperture, the more light we let into the camera and lift our exposure, but this also reduces the area that appears in focus. If we try to keep our shutter speed high to freeze motion and our f-stop to an acceptable depth of field, we would then have to compromise by raising our ISO. By increasing our ISO, we increase our sensor's sensitivity to light. However, the higher we increase our ISO, the more digital noise we're going to introduce. The more noise we introduce, the less sharp and less saturated our images are going to appear. So the number one way to fix your unsharp images is by shooting in good light in the first place. You can't fix it in post, and it's not a camera setting that's magically going to change everything. I'd like to take a moment to share with you the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. I've been using Squarespace long before they sponsored the channel, and if you're a photographer, you need a website to showcase your portfolio. I use Squarespace to run my store and publish my monthly newsletter using their email campaign tools. Updating my street photography portfolio using their image galleries couldn't be easier, and it's the perfect way for you to showcase your work outside of social media. Their easy to use templates and drag and drop design tools mean that you can create a professional looking website with no prior web design skills. Why not get started at squarespace.com with a free trial? And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/GeorgeHolden to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Does motion blur instantly ruin your photos? Well, not entirely. If you prioritize maximum sharpness on everything you shoot, you can sometimes have images that don't really feel like much. Let me explain. There are many scenarios when we want to freeze motion and have perfectly sharp subjects. But this isn't a blanket rule. Some images are actually greatly improved by the inclusion of motion blur. Whether it's a fast moving subject zooming past the camera, or it's a mixture of colours during a chaotic sporting event. By the way, go follow Spore Arts on Instagram. Lots of interesting, expressive uses of motion blur in sports photography. And while you're there, go follow my Instagram as well. I'm posting every single day this year. We can see other examples in street photography. I typically shoot with quite a fast shutter speed in good light, around 1/250th to 1/500th of a second. However, if a subject is moving too quickly and I'm at 1/250th of a second, I can still get motion blur. But this isn't always a negative. Think about the pace and the mood of a scene, because sometimes motion blur can actually enhance an image for the viewer. much more than just having a perfectly sharp image. Does this sound familiar? You get a nice fast aperture 1.8 prime lens, and then you want to shoot at 1.8 all the time. So you're out there shooting wide open, only to look back at your images and find that hardly any of your subjects are sharp whatsoever. Yeah, it's happened to most of us. Shooting wide open can be tempting when you've paid extra to have the faster aperture lens. However, the depth of field, even at 1.8, can sometimes be too shallow to get your subject's eyes, nose, and ears in focus. The focal plane is that shallow. If you want really sharp images of a solo subject from the front of their head to the back, you should really be stopping down to f4, f5.6. And then if you're trying to shoot a group of subjects and you want most of them to be in focus, try stepping down to f8 or f11. This might sound counterintuitive. I know that we've all been taught small f number equal good. However, as you see here, your images can suffer from a shallow depth of field, much more than they would suffer from having a deep depth of field with everything in focus. Let's say you stick at f2.8 to f4 and you still miss focus on an image. Does that mean you should instantly throw away those images? I'm gonna say no, because if you've captured an interesting scene, the least interesting thing about that shot should be the motion blur or the depth of field. If an image truly stands out to you and to other people, motion blur, ISO noise, depth of field are not going to come into the conversation. It's easy to say that sharp equals good, but as Ansel Adams said, there's nothing worse than a sharp image of a fuzzy concept. Quick one. Viewers of this video can pick up my Kodak film stock presets, my Fujifilm film stock presets, and my Naturally Film It presets all together in the 3-pack bundle and save an extra 20% using this code at checkout. I'll drop a link with the code in the description below this video. I have to ask you something. When you look back at your images over the last few years, which ones stand out to you the most? I found that the images that stand out most to me do not stand out most to other people, and vice versa. The images that I don't rate very highly, other people seem to really like. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this shot from Milan got a few timestamps in my video from last week. So I really want to show you the raw file of this image, and why it's a great example of an imperfect image still being good despite those imperfections. You can see from the raw metadata here, it was shot at 1/160th of a second, f4, and ISO 3200. Why was I shooting at 3200 ISO? Well, I was actually shooting video in that moment, and I had an ND filter still on the front of my lens. So when I changed the photo mode to grab this shot, I had to shoot with what I had in my hand. After applying one of my presets, applying some masking, and a lot of AI denoise, this is the image we're left with. To me, it's still unsharp, has motion blur, and I can tell it was noisy before, but I was pleasantly surprised when a few different people commented on how much they liked it despite those problems. And I talk about a similar issue in this video here, where we talk about cropping images, when to crop, when not to crop, and how it does or does not affect your images.